Industry Inner Join, uplifting data literacy across Australia and bringing conversations from data leaders straight to your ears. Get the insider information. My name is Douglas, former data analyst, now founder of DR Analytics Recruitment, and we're about to hear from one data leader. Welcome to Industry Inner Join, episode 9 of the podcast. Today I have Jess Kuan with me, Head of Data and AI at P&N Bank, almost 20 years with banking and financial services industry experience, 15 at P&N, starting in loan processing, product management, and now Head of Data and AI. Welcome to the join.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Jess, I'd love to kick things off by hearing in 300 seconds or less, tell us about your career and role at P&N.
Well, so I've always considered myself a banker. As you've said, 20 years in financial services, 15 of that in P&N. I've done roles across the organisation. So as you've rightly named it, anywhere from complaints to collections, frontline, sales to back-end processing, back office, product management, development, and then I somehow landed in data and AI. I've had this data and AI role for almost 10 years now, or just about. It's the role that I've stayed in the longest of my many other roles in my career, and certainly has been the one that's been the most exciting and the one I've learned the most in. So having been in financial services for 20 years, my experience to date in all the other roles, I think sets me up really well for, or had set me up really well for the data role. I'd always been curious about the numbers. I'd always wanted to be in the problem-solving space, although these days I find myself more in the problem discovery space more than problem-solving. But that's me in a nutshell. That's my career to date. And who knows how much longer I'd be in AI.
It seems to be the future that we're working towards. Now, I went to a talk recently where, and perhaps you could take this away, is the guest talked about an experience of people asking not what do you do for yourself, but what do you love about what you do? So what do you love about what you do?
I find myself in the intersection of technical and business. And what I love about what I do today is the ability to find a technical solution to a business problem, or the other way around, to be able to articulate a business problem into someone who is technical. So that translator role probably is where I enjoy the majority of my career, is what gets me up in the morning. And that also puts me in the intersection of, the strategic side of the business. So it puts me in the crosshairs of our board, our executive, because I am the one that's often translating, our business problems into something that they can resonate with and into something that they can help us solve.
We spoke a little bit before, but I'm going to raise it now. With 20 years in banking, how important is domain knowledge, one for your work, but also for anyone else in the data analytics field as well?
I'd probably say up front that I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have the roles that I've had in the past. In data and AI, often it's not about the data itself, or not about the analysis of the data. It's knowing where that data comes from and how it got there and what happens to it along the way. So as an example, some of the things I've found when I deal with some of my retail stakeholders or frontline stakeholders, and they're trying to solve a issue, for example, with a customer transaction, or some analysis around how we best create the next product. A lot of my experience of what I've done in the past helps me understand the actual thing they're trying to solve and be able to translate that into something meaningful for the business. So that domain knowledge means that I don't have to ask 25 questions to get to the actual root cause of the problem, because I've been there and I've done that in the past, albeit things have changed a little bit now. I instantly can understand where they're coming from and have that first-hand knowledge to help them solve the problem that they're trying to solve without really having to burden them too much with thinking about, how to turn this into a data problem.
How does that translate to the budding data analyst or the junior that's going, I really want to be in this field, and they're focused on data analytics but not domain? So how do you cultivate domain knowledge without putting in 15 years at P&N Bank?
That's an interesting question, and I think a lot of people coming out of university expect to come straight out of university and go into, building dashboards, often without really understanding where the data comes from. So at P&N, what I insist with the new analysts that are coming into the business, less so the engineers, because it's not as relevant in the engineering role. But if you are a data governance specialist, or if you're a data analyst, or even an AI specialist, what I insist is juniors spend time in the branches. So in banks, a lot of our interactions, a lot of our customer feedback comes from the frontline. So when our teams spend time in the branches, we hear firsthand what matters most to our customers. We also hear firsthand from our frontline teams as to what really frustrates them the most in terms of processes. And once we understand how that actually works in the front line, so this is, I know, instilling in a matter of 2 weeks that 25 years or 15 years worth of experience, but without that, our teams will have no way of really understanding what matters to a customer, how banks really work, how to open an account, how to fund a home loan. And so putting them through the process of having to sit in a branch, having to help our frontline teams open accounts, listening to the conversations from our customers will give them kind of firsthand expedited knowledge to the domain that they're trying to serve on the back end.
I really resonate with that. When I was a data analyst at Pioneer, I spent a few days with the account managers in collections, but there was one data engineer who had spent 3 years as an account manager and then was brought into the IT team. You could ask him any question and he knew the business flow like the back of his hand, and then could apply it in what he was doing with ETL as well. And that was incredibly valuable.
It's so powerful, right? So if you think about building data models in the back end, so even as a data engineer, in order to group your data models together, in order to build the presentation layers that your front-end teams are going to use or your data analyst teams are going to use, if you have that domain knowledge, you know how everything hangs together, and then can create a more seamless experience for your end user on the other side.
Very much agree. And then I do struggle with how do you tell someone build domain knowledge? Is it to proactively go out inside their business? Is it to take what they're doing in their day-to-day and go, oh, I'm working... last night I was at a panel and there was a gentleman that was working as a surveyor that wanted to get into data analytics. And I said, let's go do construction. Like, try to get into the construction industry as a data analyst. Mm-hmm. What would you say to building domain knowledge or even applying it for people?
It's less so about telling people to build domain knowledge, but to understand where their data comes from and what happens to their data along the process. So it's less about, I guess, needing to really understand the ins and outs of, in financial services, how to, for example, approve a home loan, but to understand, the systems that get used by our frontline teams, how data gets entered, what gets manipulated, what actually do we care about or do we not care about in our systems, and how that then flows through, from either system to system or system into your platform.
Yeah, understood. I guess moving into helping that budding data professional or data analyst, data engineer, if you were graduating right now and looking at the job industry, what do you think you'd be doing, or what would you have done again in your career?
What I often say to those asking me the exact same question coming fresh out of uni is to differentiate themselves. So every person coming out of university today has the same degree and has been through the same courses. What differentiates a candidate to someone else is the experiences that they have outside of that degree or outside of what they've learned in university. So as an example, when I hire junior analysts, I tend to hire junior analysts who have had banking experience. So my preference would be someone who is either, for example, worked in the contact center or who has worked in some other team in financial services, because they've at least had some exposure to the domain knowledge that you talk about and have a rough understanding of what makes a bank work. And that differentiates that person to the next. So what I would say to those who are just fresh out of university, thinking that they can come into a role and be a data analyst immediately, that probably is true for some. But for many, given the industry today and given the number of applicants we have today for the junior roles, you need to find a way to differentiate yourself or find a way to stand out versus the rest. And this can be things like a project that you've done in university. Maybe you've joined a hackathon. Demonstrate those skills that you can apply yourself outside of just the university course and actually into the real world.
You must have hired hundreds of data professionals, maybe 50s?
We've hired a few, and some of the best ones I've hired have come from, I guess, very different roles. So we've hired those who have been in HR. So I know in my rap sheet that you talked about before, I've been in so many roles. HR is probably one of the roles that I've never been in. And so I thought if I hire someone in HR, I can learn something from him. And I certainly did. So, that person came with, I guess, experience around employee relations, how to deal with people, how to negotiate agreements. And that is so powerful for a data analyst, because if you think about presenting a report to a stakeholder, you will need to be able to articulate your findings, negotiate your position, because don't assume that just because you've presented very fancy data that they will accept your recommendations. It's often not the case. Analytics is a lot about engaging your stakeholder, convincing them to buy into the recommendation. And it's less about, what it actually says on that piece of paper, albeit that piece of paper supports what you're talking about when it comes to that recommendation.
Agreed. What would you say the top 3 traits are that you're screening for when you're interviewing someone? And this could perhaps be for someone that's going to an interview, or it could be for another hiring manager that's about to interview someone. What are those top 3 criteria?
It will be different from role to role, but the number 1 criteria I look for is critical thinking. So throw a problem at someone. How do they step-by-step methodically work through that problem to come up with a solution? The solution can be right or wrong. That's not the point. The point is how they methodically kind of think about the problem at hand, how they relate that problem to, something that's relevant to them or something that's relevant to what they're trying to solve. And then, the number 2 bit, very much related to critical thinking, is it's all well and good to be a critical thinker. You've got to be able to communicate. So often I find a lot of data people are very good at the technical, but not so good at explaining the technical or explaining their analysis or, translating the technical bit to business speak such that a business person, because let's be real, the people who we talk to on a daily basis, data's not their focus. It's not their main job, right? Their main job is to sell home loans. And so how do you talk about, very complex analysis to a person who just wants to talk to the next customer and sell them their next home loan, and help them understand why the analysis matters and how they should think or how they should change their decisions based on your analysis? A lot of that is stakeholder management, a lot of that is communication, a lot of that is articulation of the technical back into the business. So critical thinking, being able to break down the problem and analyze it, but then equally, that's no good if you can't translate that into something that someone else understands.
So critical thinking being the main one?
Communication being the second.
Yeah. Number 3?
Number 3 will probably be, and it's a little bit abstract, but culture, fit. So what I look for is fit within team that we already have. So again, if you have someone who does not fit within the culture, they will find it very difficult to gel with the team, and then therefore to learn from or to influence that team.
Do you think there's people that are more malleable to other cultures? So if you say, like, then speaking of company cultures, if someone is more malleable, does mean that more companies would see them as a cultural fit, and there's some other people that are more abrasive where only 10% of companies are going to see them as a cultural fit. Do you think that's a phenomenon that occurs?
I think that there are some similar traits that majority of companies would look for. So, friendliness, openness to change, being adaptable to the environment as an example. I'd see that as the common traits that someone would look for. But then equally, there will be roles, and depending on the type of role that you're employing for, that there will be roles, for example, that you would look for certain types of behaviors, so such as assertiveness, in maybe more managerial roles versus, someone who is more willing to change their views and be, malleable, as you say, in probably some other roles. So I do think there isn't a one-size-fits-all necessarily, and that there is certainly a role for everyone, is my belief. It's just about finding that right organization and the right position that fits the person. I've also often seen a lot of people who are very, very good, for example, technically, and would excel in certain, let's say, technical roles being incorrectly placed into, for example, managerial roles, and they haven't necessarily done well, and vice versa. So there's certainly a fit for, in my opinion, there's certainly a fit for each role, but it very much depends on the role and what the demands of that role.
The reason I ask that question is culture fit is often cited as a reason that someone may not go forward in an interview process, and it can be a frustrating, how do I work on my culture fit if it's how I am? But understanding there's certain traits that are more attractive for certain roles, and say assertiveness, like you said, is better for a manager.
And that fit changes over time as well for different people. So I suppose if I reflect back on my career and my cultural changes over time, I'd say, in certain roles earlier in my career, I was expected to be, I guess, more hands-on, more technical, maybe, there is less of a need for me to, say, communicate or influence. Was today, I think, all of what I do is communicate and influence. If I think about who I deal with on a day-to-day basis, that is the board and the executive, and what's required of me today in terms of being able to resonate with the board and executive, and that cultural fit would be very different to what was expected of me 20 years ago.
And I think culturally businesses have changed as well. There's no longer the shouting manager. It's more of the soft-spoken leader. I think that's more culturally accepted in the 21st century.
Although the soft-spoken leader still needs to be able to get their point across in a way that isn't too softly spoken, but also is not the shouting type.
Yeah, a fine line. Another fine line is this. You've mentioned your top 3 skills that you look for when hiring, and they've all been critical thinking, communication, culture fit. None of those are technical skills. So the professional that does a data science degree and learns all the technical skills, how do you reconcile there being this soft skill aspect in roles that are mostly technical? Is this technical skill a given, or how do you see that dynamic evolving?
And things have certainly changed. So yes, I see the technical skill a given. So if you've come out of university, we expect you to have a certain base level of understanding. More important to me than your technical skill is your willingness to learn. So technical skill can be taught, and if you're not the best technical person, that can, we can cultivate that over time. However, some of the other skills that I spoke about in terms of critical thinking, as an example, communication, that's a lot harder to teach than technical skill is. So yes, there's an expectation of technical skill, but then equally, if I wind back to interviews, 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, when we were hiring for data analysts, it was very common for us to put a technical test in front of the analyst. We'd give them a spreadsheet. We'd say, okay, now go and create a report and present this report to me and show me what you can do. That's no longer the case anymore. And in fact, AI can do this for you, right? So less important is your ability to put that report together or use the technical skill to build the report. But it's more important to me that you're able to understand what the report says and being able to articulate what it actually presents, rather than the ability to do the doing, if you know what I mean.
The point of entry is having a certain level of technical skill, and then that threshold is decreasing with AI.
It 100% is decreasing.
Communication as well.
And even if you think about the very highly technical roles like data engineering, a lot of where AI is aimed today is in coding, is in the thing that the data engineer does on a day-to-day basis. Now, I'm not saying that the data engineering role will disappear, because there is a role for a data engineer, but the need to demonstrate your ability to code is probably no longer the top of the list, because in the main, AI, as an example, will get you 80% there. Yes, there is an expectation that you can code and that you can review the AI and you understand its outputs, and you're able to, I guess, either correct the outputs or use that in a meaningful way. But the benchmark has changed.
I've seen it as a development time has decreased, but QA time has increased. But the overall software development or development lifecycle has also decreased as a whole. So it's sort of like this. That's kind of how I've seen it evolving.
It's 100% true, although I do worry a little bit about what that means for the future of a data engineer when the development time is decreasing, meaning the time on the tools is decreasing, therefore potentially meaning the experience of someone is reducing. So the amount of time they actually spend coding often is what teaches them how to code. If that's decreasing, what does it mean for the data engineer of the future? But that's probably another conversation.
Yeah. I see a phenomenon shifting towards the right, and the right being towards the business side and the left being the technical side. Now those roles will shift to the right, and the new data engineer will be closer to the business, potentially.
I think
full
that's happening.
Back to communication.
That's happening already. So in the past, you probably would have data engineers isolated in the dark room, coding, and that's all they do. Today, more often than not, and certainly is the case for my team, we expect the data engineer to be able to speak to the business. And actually, we expect the data engineer to be able to gather requirements from the business and translate their requirements into the data engineering world.
Pipelines or views.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. As we talk about AI, how are you using it personally and professionally, if you can share?
So probably personally, I am off and on user of AI. And as a head of data and AI, I probably shouldn't say that, but that is the truth. I use it sparingly, I guess, in my personal life. Probably don't see a use case for it on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not one of those, for example, who has fully wired my house with AI and have, the AI do everything for me from the time I walk through the door. I certainly know of people who do that. So as I walked in, I'm home, and the AI turns on their lights, turns on their music, puts the stove on, turns the oven on, whatever that may be. I'm not there yet, and don't think I will ever get there. I struggle sometimes to let my car drive itself.
You got a Tesla?
Trust issues. I've got a BMW iX1. So electric car still, but and it does have self-driving capabilities, but I still like to park my own car.
I would too. I'd be quite concerned about hitting another car.
And I don't know what it is. I think it's just it's just something that I'm used to, and I like to be able to still. I guess my fear probably is I will no, I guess in the future, if I don't drive my car, I will forget how to drive it. I know that it's not true because I still jumped on a bicycle and could still ride a bicycle quite easily after many years. And I'm sure driving a car is exactly the same. But I guess everyone goes through a change curve, and I'm on that change curve. Professionally, look, we've spent the better part of the last 18 months since I put up an AI strategy on frameworks, governance, policies and processes. We have only recently, in the last 3 to 6 months, rolled out, AI to the entire organization. And we're seeing some real tangible benefits from, specifically on the productivity side, from the users of AI. These are simple things like Copilot for now. And certainly in the engineering world, in the development world, we have coding assistants helping them and have been helping them for the past 6 months. What we are seeing is, I guess, better quality of code that's coming through, more consistent, understanding of the syntax or the way in which they code. And what that's driving, less from the coding perspective, is a good amount of documentation. So in the past, our coders like to just code and do the thing that they do best without necessarily wanting to explain themselves. What AI does for them is the thing that they least like to do, which is to explain themselves, to document the code. So we're seeing certainly better quality on the coding side by the use of AI. On the business side, I think what that's actually done is it's helped us dramatically change our conversations. So it's driving a richer level of curiosity across the business, because now access to data and access to information is a lot easier with natural language. And the AI is doing a lot of the early level, I guess, analysis for our business users, such that they can really apply themselves into asking the difficult questions on the other side and actually having really robust conversations around the what if and so what on the back of what AI is surfacing on the front end. So what the AI is doing probably is the initial analysis. It's saying, hey, have a look at this. Then we're spending less time thinking about the basic metrics, but spending more time delving into the more relevant metrics after the AI surfaced the basic.
Are you already playing with, I think it's Snowflake Cortex, where business users can query the LLM
Snowflake
or query the
Intelligence.
database with natural language?
Snowflake Intelligence.
Yeah. Snowflake
So we have rolled out Snowflake Intelligence in production to all of our business users. Not all data sets, some data sets. So the key data sets you would expect a bank to be looking at. So just things like your portfolio information, so loans and deposits, understanding of what makes up the portfolio, what's changing over time, where it's coming from, the types of loans we're writing. All of that has been put into Snowflake Intelligence. And because we've spent such a long time previously on data governance, adding the new data sets was actually quite simple, because we had a fairly good understanding of what things meant on the data set level. So we're slowly adding in additional data sets. We recently put in customers, so we can now query, for example, who's joining us, who's leaving us, why they're leaving us, who they are, where do they come from, those types of questions. And that's freeing up time for our analysts, because the analyst isn't necessarily the one that's having to answer those questions from the business. The business is taking the very high-level metric produced by the analysts. And by the way, I think there is still a place for metrics or common metrics, but then delving into those common metrics to further understand it a little bit more using natural language.
The business is constantly asking this one question, and an analyst can dive deeper on it and support them in their search for whatever they're looking for.
What's actually happening is the business was asking us many different questions at different times. So what used to happen before AI or before Snowflake Intelligence is the business will say, how many customers do we have and what do they look like? And how has it changed from previously? Oh, and what about this? And now that you've given me this information, can you also tell me that? And that's no longer happening because the business can now self-serve and can go and ask the AI the questions themselves. Of course, they'll need to validate those answers from AI because it does get it wrong sometimes. But at high level, it's doing the initial analysis. So we're trying to bring in a let's call it a gold, silver, bronze layer where, gold metrics are things that are commonly published. So these are things like your corporate metrics, things that are well-defined, well-understood, set at a period of time. Then your silver, for example, is things that are still produced by the analytics team, validated by the analytics team, on the back of probably the bronze level metrics, which is asked by the business, surfaced by the business, questioned by the business. So the bronze level is what the AI is doing, is what the AI is helping us with today. That turns into the silver level when they want to use that for decision making or use that for external reporting or use that for something that is bigger than just, I just want to know. And then your gold level metrics are the ones that are openly reported, things go into your annual report as an example.
Understood. I was smiling then as you were talking about the little requests that you'd get. As when I was a data analyst, there'd be a small request for how many accounts do we have in this area by this demographic. And that small request would take 2 days.
And then this and then that.
And then it was, oh, what about this as well? And there's another 2 days on top. Whereas that eliminates the distraction, having Snowflake Intelligence. Do you see, and this is a theory I've been playing with, I haven't found anything tangible yet to support, but do you see the role of a data analyst in the future basically supporting that Snowflake, say it's a model that's running within Snowflake Intelligence, all they're doing is watching the drift and improving that model over time and perhaps doing some reports for specific use cases. Do you see that as the future of a data analyst potentially?
Yes and no. I wouldn't necessarily... So roles are changing as a result of AI. So I wouldn't necessarily say that is a role of a data analyst in the future. That may be a role of a AI engineer in the future, less so the data analyst. I think the data analyst role is still to surface insights and information about the reports that they are producing such that the business can make decisions. I think the role of detecting drift, monitoring the model, retraining those models is more of a role for what I would call an AI engineer or ML engineer to manage and maintain. And those types of roles certainly will exist down the track and will become more in demand as AI starts to grow.
Where other roles do you think are coming up? We've seen the data science boom 5-7 years ago, where data scientist was the hot topic. Now I'm seeing less data scientists, more ML engineers, and we've got about 3 AI developer roles. And for those playing online listening, I'm putting my quotation fingers up because each AI developer is a different type of AI developer. So there's no definition in that sense. But my question is, what roles do you see evolving as AI comes out to play for real?
I would certainly say there will be a lot more roles around training and monitoring the AI. And this is mostly from the technical end, albeit a lot of AI roles today aren't overly technical. They're about knowing where to go for the information and knowing which button to press because AI does it all for you. So even though I say that the future looks like an AI engineer, it does not look like an engineer today because an engineer today is still expected to code and write something up from scratch, whereas an engineer in the future will probably no longer be expected to write something up from scratch, but should know where to go to and who to go to and what to do in terms of pressing the right buttons to get the AI to self-learn, self-teach, self-evaluate, and correct the biasness or the drifts that exist within the algorithms.
But thereby we have a paradox of if you haven't done it yourself, how do you know what's right? If you're just deciding which journey.
Back to my initial social dilemma of
Yes.
what would happen to the engineers of, tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll leave a question mark on that one. Moving to a bit more of, I guess, personal lens, what would you say your greatest achievement is, whether professionally or personally, that you've had?
Professionally, I would say at the bank, about 10 years ago, I recognized that we didn't necessarily have a centralized data team. And at the point in time, I advocated to go to university and do a degree myself to learn about data science at that point in time, which was popular. And that allowed me or gave me the keys to build up and stand up a data team in the organization. So the standing up of that data team, coming up with that idea, putting it all together, and actually convincing my CEO to give me some money is probably the biggest achievement I have to date professionally.
It's probably paid itself back tenfold over the last
100%,
few years.
yes.
Lovely. And that's on the professional side. Any personal achievements to share?
Personal achievements, that's a little bit harder. Not necessarily, I don't think I can necessarily think about one right now.
Just achieving every day.
I will think about that and come back to you.
We'll put it in the post
Yes.
pod in the comments. Perhaps on the other side of achievements, any biggest mistakes that you could share? I mean, everyone's got them.
Earlier on in my career, I was very eager to prove myself. And I'd say, that resulted in me taking on more than I could handle, and not knowing how to say no. I thought that the more that I could do, the more that someone would recognize, my capabilities. And then that in part is true. But it led to, I guess, personal burnout, and I think I put myself back 2 or 3 years because of that. I was so single focus on I have to do this thing and I have to be the person that produces the most work, and didn't really pay attention to some of the things we spoke about before in terms of communication, stakeholder management, really talking about my achievements, because I was so focused on just doing the work. And I see this often, in a lot of people as well, where, I guess that desire to let the work prove themselves or prove their worth probably overtakes the bigger picture around what do I need to do from a self-development perspective. And it was a trap that I fell into, and one that I thought if I didn't focus so much on doing the work and proving that I could do the work, and I didn't fall into this whole couple of years of there's too much going on and I can't handle this anymore, I think I would probably be 2 years ahead.
How did you find out and make the change?
I have ex-managers, mentors to thank. I've been very fortunate in my career, and especially at the bank, where I've had really good managers lead me along the way and help me see, I guess, what I couldn't see myself. They were there for me when I really needed them to be there for me. They were there to give me advice. They were there to correct my course. And often it was about me just trusting in the information that was being fed to me at that point in time, no matter how difficult it was to hear that information. So I'd certainly say if you haven't got one, find yourself a mentor, or I guess I've been fortunate enough to have managers who have been really good mentors and continue to be really good mentors to me. It's a program that the bank has as well. And that's helped me advance to maybe where I am today.
That's awesome, the importance of mentors. Yeah, I think it's always relevant to keep bringing up. As we bring this into land, do you have any final comments or perhaps suggestions for the data community of Perth, where you want to see people learning more or what you want to see more of from young professionals?
I would like to see a focus less on the technical. So coming back to my top three, a focus less on the technical. But I often see that the people who succeed and the people who do really well, certainly in the corporate world, are those who are able to navigate the corporate structure. And so it's less about the technical capability, but being able to know who to speak to, when to ask for help, when to go to certain people for advice, as an example. And so I think that ability to communicate at different levels is one that's certainly very important. There's no one size fits all in terms of I must be a certain way. I think you've got to be able to flex with your audience or your stakeholders and being able to adapt to, the thing that you're trying to deliver at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Critical thinking, communication, and culture.
100%.
Jess Kuan, thank you very much. Episode 9 of In the Join.
Thank you, Doug.